All right, we're getting started on YouTube. All right, let me start that over again. So again, this is the high school portion of the breakout sessions for the leadership conference. We have Jack Weinberg, the High School Committee Chair, who will be hosting this for us and walking us through all things related to high school hockey. So what I will do, a couple ways to ask questions. The Q&A button is there, chat as well. I'll be monitoring that for Jack and I'll share those questions with him. And then
can you bring in Bob Wagner on this too?
Yeah, I'll be bringing in, yeah. So the other thing is anybody that's not on a panelist right now, I'll be bringing in the group of people that are on as participants. So you'll be on the screen. If you have a question for Jack or anybody on the panel, you can just unmute yourself, ask the question, turn your video on if you want to be seen. While we're discussing, while Jack's talking, if you are on, if you have, make sure your mute button is, you are muted so we don't hear any background noise. But you'll see a little blip in your screen as I bring you into the meeting as a participant, rather than just somebody listening. So with that, I'll let Jack kind of start off the show, and I will start bringing folks in. And Jack, it's all yours.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. As usual, high school is anchoring the team. We're the last presentation of the day, so let's go through this with some alacrity and get moving. Jim, you can come up on our next slide, please. Real quickly, high school is very different than any of the other disciplines within A-High. There are, we have 4 years worth of kids playing on one team, which makes it unique. You can only play for an organization that includes your school. You don't have a choice between, where you want to play. It's governed by where you go to school. The high school committee is made up of the heads of all the major leagues in our state. So what you have is Evan Polakaitis at SHL. You have Nick from Catholic League. You have Bob Wagner from North Central. Brian Meek has taken over now. Jim McKeague, who is a stalwart of our committee for many, many years, is retired. Rob Ince is running the Hayes division. As I said, Brian Meek is running West. We have in the girls division, Claire O'Connor is the president and on our board. I don't know if I've forgotten anybody, I hope not. At any rate, also on our committee, a couple more people, Ned Forsberg, who's been involved with the girls side for many, many years and has helped us tremendously with the all-state teams, both boys and girls. And a new member is Spencer Montgomery. Spencer is a coach in the Catholic League, as well as being a member of the Blackhawk organization. So our efforts have been to try and improve hockey wherever we can for high school. So that pretty much makes up the high school committee. I'd like to, at this point, if Bob Wagner is ready, talk about a program first up, which is our goalie program. We have, as I think most of you are aware, that we have a program to try and find goalies for programs that need them and places for goalies to play. Bob, would you take over on that, please? Do we have audio from Bob?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Jack?
Can hear you. Go.
Jack? All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Bob Wagner. If you don't, what? Can you hear me, Jack?
We're good.
Rose?
All good. We can hear you fine.
We are good. All right. I'm Bob Wagner. What? Having difficulties on my end, I think. So we're good, Jack?
Yes.
John, can you hear me? Done?
Yeah,
Jim,
we can hear you.
live, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I was having problems because I couldn't hear you guys the first couple minutes. All right, I'm Bob Wagner, who's ever's on, welcome. And I run the goalie pool for the high school committee. For those of you who don't know, any goalies you have extra above what you need for your teams, whatever that is, you could put into the pool. And I strongly hope you do. Last year I placed about 40 boys goalies and about 10 7, 8, 10 girl goalies. Easily could have placed 50 and easily could have placed 15. So I could have used 10, 15 more boys and girls, high school age. So please, if you have extra goalies, send them my email, which I assume Jack can send out, or John, and my phone number. I don't care. Try to get you placed, your players placed. They're only placed for one season, so the fall season, and then they come back to your home team. You know, I've had kids from Buffalo Grove that have played 4 years for other schools, don't care, happy they're playing. But if you, for some reason, fall short, you know, as a senior year, this kid's still playing, as opposed to some of you schools, which I know don't tell them about me or this program, then the kids have, the kids disappear, stop playing completely. You know, any kid can play for any other team if he's placed by me and approved by Jack, high school wise, not any other leagues, just high school. So if you're not using a kid or he has a school that isn't part of a high school team, I can place him on whatever team is most need is my number one concern. Obviously proximity is my number two. And number three, just making sure the kid's happy. But last year, again, I think I placed 38 boys and 7 or 8 girls. The year before that, it was like 35 and like 5. So the program's certainly being utilized. Most kids will stay for spring season where they're at, where I send them. But you certainly, as the home team, have the right to retain them back. And it says in the letter, when I place a kid, I send a letter to the president of the club he's leaving, the president of the incoming club, and the hockey director, head coach, and then the parents. So everybody knows it's for one season or 1 year, however you want to look at it. But they're technically go back to their home programs for spring. So just want people aware of it. If you're not, if you have a pen, I'm Bob Wagner. My phone number is 847-732-8768. And my email is rwags, RWAGS 517 @gmail.com. And I'm on the high school committee on the A-High book and all that. So I'm easy to find. But want these kids to play, and we need goalies across the board. I mean, I've had schools with 3 teams with not one goalie of their own. So you'd have 60 kids not playing high school hockey if I don't get goalies from somewhere. So I don't care if he's the worst kid. I don't care if he's the best kid, and whatever. But they can come to us. But FYI, if a kid refuses to play for you, he cannot play for anyone else. So if a kid says, no, we're not playing for Buffalo Grove, we don't like the coach, then he ain't playing high school hockey. He has to be released by his home team. And I make sure of that because that certainly has come up in years past. So any questions, I guess, refer them to, me now or Jack.
All right. Thanks, Bob. I'm looking at, I don't think we have any questions yet, but I'll keep looking at the chat box. So that's the goalie program.
Yeah, and I apologize. My
It's,
line is real bad, so I apologize if I fall off.
no problem. You can mute now, Bob, for now until they need you.
Yeah. Will do.
All right. So let's just go down the line here on this slide, which is high school committee, we've explained. Rules and Ethics Committee at A-High is chaired by Greg Shuttikoff. They control everything that is off ice. So if you have zero tolerance with parents, if you have issues about money, anything else, that falls under R&E. Suspension Review Committee, which is chaired by Kevin Bolger, is the on-ice issues. Inquiries in terms of on-ice issues only come from presidents of organizations. Coaches, players, parents are not considered part of the program at this point. If there is something that you have a question on, a call, or something that's going on ice, all that goes through Kevin Bolger. Match penalties, all of them get adjudicated through the suspension and review committee. Understand how these things work. 90% of your questions will go to Laura Johnson at the registrar's office. She has the most information, the most informed, and probably the most patience of all of us. So if you have a question about anything in terms of registering kids, we just had the session on safe sport and screening. All of those things you can talk to Laura about. She can get you straightened away. Officiating. I believe Eric is on the call. We at the high school committee recommend, and really almost close to a rule, would like you to have an IHOA rep come to each high school program at the beginning of the year and speak to your parents, coaches, and players together about what's going on in the rules, what's expected of them, what issues will be dealt with on the ice, and what is likely to happen if you don't deal with those issues. You can call there. Hold on just a moment. So that's what's going on there. Each league has their own discipline committee, R&E and so forth. The leagues themselves have the right to increase the penalties that happen on the ice. Many leagues, if a kid gets 3 from fighting from a high and the referee, some leagues give 5 or 6 games for fighting, and various things. They have that right. Every program has the right to appeal any of those issues to the suspension review committee. But I will tell you that the league itself has the right, according to their bylaws, to be able to add additional discipline. So that's league rules, discipline, and appeal. I will tell you that during the last season, that was our quote normal season, we had an inordinate amount of problems in the stands, with students, with parents, with alcohol. You as a club are responsible for all of those things. If you cannot handle it internally, then it will go to the league and it will go to A-High. Many programs at this point are required to have a policeman at every game. Depending on the crowd that you have, either your league or A-High may tell you, you know what, your program isn't safe unless there's an actual uniformed policeman in your crowd, controlling what's going on there. Most of the leagues have security. You'll see them in their orange or yellow coats. Those people are just volunteers. They're there to try and get the people on their own team under control, not to interface with parents or opposing fans. If there is a problem, they're instructed to call 411. They are not policemen. They're not there in that role, but they're there to try and keep the game safe for everybody who's participating. The alcohol, and I think Greg Shedikoff talked to this point earlier during the R&E session yesterday. Alcohol may be the largest single factor destroying our game. We have tailgating. We have people renting rooms and rinks. I personally was threatened by a parent that was thrown out just because I happened to be there and they thought I had some responsibility for it. This won't be tolerated. Last year, Bob's still on the call. We had a team in his league that was no longer allowed to have a student section because they caused so much trouble and started a fight. High school is a wonderful, wonderful experience and should be a good experience. But there's no reason that anything that won't be allowed by your high school programs, football, baseball, soccer, or anything else should happen at an ice rink. And if it does, the worst thing that'll happen is you'll be thrown out of playing hockey. Your whole group, your board can be thrown out. You can be kept from playing in state. These are the last thing any of us on the board would like to do.
No, I'm listening to a call.
And I hear Greg in the background. But these are the things that can happen. Please make sure that you have done all the things possible to keep your programs running in line. Among them, and I'll let someone else talk to it a little bit later, but there was the last program was, about safe sport and about screening. There are much, much bigger requirements. And in high school programs where we've got older players at a certain age, they are required to go through safe sport. And beyond that, if they're coaching and playing or refereeing, they're going to have to go through screening as well. Be aware of these things. All the members of a high school board must be screened and go through safe sport. It's absolutely mandatory, or they will not be allowed to work around the children on the team, and the rosters will not be certified as such. Jim, can you move me ahead to the next slide, please? Okay. Obviously, you know that we play under the jurisdiction of USA Hockey. In terms of what's going to go on this year, we're all very much waiting to see what's going to happen. Our local municipalities control what goes on. Our state controls what goes on. USA Hockey at some point will control what goes on. But for right now, there will not be any certified rosters issued until we have further notice from the state and everybody else as to what's going on. What does that mean? Yes, you can, as a program, capture players and buy ice, and according to the rules of the municipality, the rink, the state, have some kind of on ice practices. But you are responsible, and you have to decide what it is that you're following and be aware of those rules. Our most important mission in hockey at all of USA is safety, physical, mental, all of the factors that are included, which means that don't put your players in a position to be hurt physically or mentally, to be infected. And, it's not like we haven't been through flu epidemics and chicken pox and everything else that has jumped up into high school. And as an adult, you have to be the responsible one, because those kids are desperate to play, but you have to make adult decisions. The behavior of the parents, fans, teams, coaches, I think you got that. Understand that the high school committee interfaces very closely with suspension review. We track all the penalties on all the teams and all the players. If there's a bad actor, either as a player, as a team, as a coach, or a program, suspension review will work in concert with the high school committee and bring in a whole program. It's happened several times in the last few years. It's not pleasant for anyone, but in most cases, it has turned the tide and things have been straightened out. Right now, I'd like to talk a little bit. I'm going to look real quickly in the chat and see if there's anything I need to look at the moment. I don't think so. Okay, I think we're still okay. Let's talk about rules. One thing that we did this year, because we just didn't know when high school was going to begin, and because IHSA runs their own program, we've always been sort of attached to the IHSA guideline in terms of when we start high school teams going. Since high schools everywhere are really upside down, we, in different areas and different municipalities, we, as the AHI board, voted to detach that requirement from us this year. That being said, there is a hard start date. August 15th, which is when the midget programs in Tier 2 start, is the same date that you can start high school hockey, not before. What you're doing in the summer in terms of skates and so forth is a different issue. And you can talk to Laura, and if she's on, she can speak to those issues. But for the time being, the hard start date is August 15th. Hard date meaning until the state or someone else in authority changes those rules. We don't know. We honestly have no idea, what's going to happen in 30 or 60 days from now. We're hoping things will get better. We're hoping we get to phase 5, but we really don't know. Regardless, there will be no competition of any kind until there's a certified roster, and those won't be issued until the time is right. New proposals this year. We have not finished the writing of all of these, but the first and most important that is in the works is that we are going to get rid of having teams do a 7 down. We had the 7 up, 7 down rule. Now we're going to not have the ability for players to be sent down. It's actually, it doesn't make sense for a varsity sport to send kids down. Often it's done as a way to bolster a lower team in terms of their competitiveness, not their numbers. We've increased the numbers that are required for a certified team, and you should have enough people up front. We are looking at expanding the program of bringing players up. We are in discussions among the committee. We haven't finished. Right now, the prevailing intelligence says that we're going to probably have 6 players that will be allowed to play as many as 10 games up on varsity before they are frozen to the varsity. There is some discussion about allowing more players to play in non-league games than the 6, so that they can get that experience, which is a wonderful thing in a varsity program. But for right now, what we're keying in on is that we're going to limit the number that can go up for 10 games at the varsity level. And that has repercussions that will be talked about in terms of state tournament. And when we finish writing the rule and passing it, we'll make everybody aware. The other major change that we're talking about for this year is the JV state tournament. And while we haven't passed this entirely, again, the prevailing intelligence is that we are going to move to an entirely different system. We're not going to get rid of the JV state tournament, but it's going to look much, much more like an NCAA tournament. What that would mean is that the top teams in the top divisions of the various leagues would play for state. For example, the top 4 teams in North Central and the top 4 teams in SHL, sorry, Catholic League West, all those teams would become eligible for the state tournament. If those teams are playing JV, but they're rostered at state at varsity, they would not be eligible. So say if in one of the leagues, one of the top 4 teams at the end of the regular season was a team that was actually registered as varsity in state, it would not play in the JV state tournament, and team 5 would take its place. We have a few JV teams that are actually playing in 2 leagues. They will have to pre-select and work with the high school committee. At the beginning of the season, they will have to petition to play in the state tournament before their season even begins, and they will be placed by the high school committee in, as to which league they will be eligible to try to qualify for state. It's basically the only fair way to do it. So those are the main proposals, new proposals for this year. Next slide. Okay, talk a little bit about state tournament. The voting for all state and so forth will remain the same. Showcase. Obviously, at this point, all of the fall showcases are off. The showcase that we're going into was canceled, and there was no way even to know if we'll be able to put a team in at that point. We have hopes that we will be able to do the spring showcase and the all-state selections as usual. And that will require coaches to vote. And there are a lot of coaches that have chosen not, for whatever reason, to vote for their all-state candidates and for their showcase. We really need your help. This is an essential part of your job as a coach. I'm trying to bring up the chat here as to some questions. Let's see, I am going to get to Don Allard towards the end. Let's see. Varsity tournament, have you taken another look at the fairness of the bracket relative to how it was built last year? Answer is, we look at it every year. We're trying to find a good way to include everybody. The majority of the hockey community has appreciated the change in the bracket system. It's complicated, but it does allow for other teams, for teams to play some games before just getting killed. Again, the concept was to make the very top teams not have to play teams that are at the very bottom. It's a terrible game. It's a dangerous game because oftentimes the teams on the bottom are just trying to hurt somebody because they can't compete on their skill level. And for the upper team, it's a chance to get hurt. And that's the last thing any of us want. It's always up for consideration. And anytime you want to write a letter to the high school committee through me, I will turn it over to the entire committee to consider. I don't have any desire other than to try and make things better. Let's see, I have another question here in the chat. When can we expect final guidance on the proposed rule to change the 10 up, etc.? I'd say in the next couple of weeks. I'm planning to get some of my high school committee was out of town, and I'm trying to get them all on a call so that we can decide this and then move it forward to the AHI board for confirmation. But I would tell you that the ability to go down is basically not going to exist. That's been pretty much the consensus since the beginning. How and how many players might be allowed to play up, that's the main concern right now, and we will be discussing that. At this point, Don Allard, you had a couple things that you wanted to add to the conversation. Do you want to come on board?
Thanks, Jack. Good morning, everybody. I sent a chat out to everyone to make this presentation or this part of the presentation a little quicker. Just one thing I wanted to let everybody know. The big question that I've been getting is, as the Central District Risk Manager, is does the insurance cover COVID-19? And the answer to that question is our insurance is an injury policy, not an insurance policy. It will specifically exclude COVID-19 when the season starts and the new policy is written sometime after August 15th. As a board member, you should, even though COVID-19 is not covered, should somebody contract COVID-19 and try to blame the board or sue the board for some sort of a reason, whether it be they think that they did it intentionally or held some sort of a meeting where COVID-19 was allegedly contracted, the USA Hockey Insurance will cover the boards for incidents like that. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. John Dunn, is there anything else you would like to add to this conversation at this point?
No, I think you covered all the bases for us, and I think we're good.
Let's see. What am I looking at? Is there any, let's see, here's a question. Is there any consideration to allowing a change to game day rosters so a team can dress 16 forwards, 8 defensemen, and 2 goalies? You mean 12, all right, 12 forwards, 20 and 2 goalies? No. A roster for a game, unlike ACHA, is only 20. So if you're looking to go above 20, that's not something we do in youth hockey in USA. Jim Clare, am I correct in that?
I believe so. If Laura is on, I'll defer to her to make sure we're correct, but game days are 20.
Yeah, this is a USA Hockey rule, and it's actually 18 and 2. According to USA Hockey, you can't even skaters and 1 goaltender. You can only dress 18 skaters and 2 goaltenders, and you're also limited to 4 coaches on the bench as well.
Yeah, I believe you could actually dress 3 goalies and less skaters, but your total has to be 20, if I'm not mistaken. You can dress several more goalies if you like, but you have to decrease your skater count to compensate.
Yeah, I should have clarified that, Jack. Thank you. But it's not the other way around. You can't go up on the skater numbers. You can only go up on the goaltender numbers.
That's correct.
To a total of 20.
Do we have anybody else with questions out there at the moment?
If anybody has them, you can just go off mute and ask the question if you want, or type it into the chat or Q&A.
Jack, if I may make just one other comment. I know there were a couple of AHI high school affiliates that submitted spring rosters. And we like to make sure, and then uploaded them to the AHI web tool. We like to make sure that our data is clean. So I have gone into the USA Hockey registry for, there's 3 organizations, and I have sent emails out. But what I didn't include in that email is that if you could please send an update from your registry to the, from your USA Hockey registry to the AHI web tool, so that those teams get removed from our AHI database. And please, at this point in time, don't submit any new high school teams for the spring summer season. If something happens and we're able to open up, we will certainly notify everyone that a roster can be done at that point in time, but we don't want them in the system if they're not actual teams, because none of them have been approved.
All right.
Okay, so
I
I think
did
Bill
have one
Driscoll
more.
has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Just in the event that we suffer some type of disruption due to the virus, will all roster dates and everything be moved? Because at times it's already difficult early in the season when I get players from 4 different youth organizations coming in to figure out exactly where they should sit. And if we get in some way disrupted, will all those dates move?
I believe that it's been considered and that some dates could move and things could slide back. Obviously, in high school, we don't seem to be concerned in Illinois too much with nationals, so that doesn't really affect us. But yes, things could slide back. Jim, we've discussed that in your previous calls. You want to address that?
Yeah, I think, and Bill, it's a great question. And we discussed it with the youth leagues as well, that, as of right now, we think we're in, a good spot to maintain tryouts at certain dates that we have listed in our rule books and so on. If things get pushed back or shut down in the middle and we have to restart, the leagues, even the youth leagues are planning for a scenario like that if they have to start later, they can go longer. Since we've decoupled, and Jack knows this better than I do, from the IHSA kind of rule book for this 1 year, I think there's some flexibility there for the high schools to do the same kind of thing. That if something happens and it either gets pushed, the delayed start, or there's a couple weeks shutdown in the middle, we can make it up on the back end because, but the challenge, the only challenge from the high schools that I see with that is the high school state tournament and the finals being at the UC, right? And we are beholden to them on when we can actually use that building. So, sliding and moving that the high school season is really going to be dependent a lot on that as well, right? Because we need to finish that up and have those teams ready to go to the UC when they allow us to be there. And their flexibility, in my opinion, and Jack may concur, it's going to be a lot less than ours, right? Because that building's tough to nail down. So I would say stay tuned on that. And as Jack works with the UC and the dates there, we'll probably have some more information as we get closer to the August 15th date. But it's a great question and one we've thought of for sure.
Okay. And just one other question regarding the rule change on the 10 up.
Yeah.
Are the roster sizes going to remain at the same level? So where I fare is if I take a kid as more of a bubble varsity player and his ice time is not as great as he'd like, and he needs a little bit the confidence that comes with going down to play JV once in a while. That's at least the way I have always used 7 up, 7 down. It's kind of one program trying to find the best kids for the best slots by the time playoffs hit. I look at JV as a development program, not as I'm trying to win JV state championships. And so with that growing or lack of flexibility with only 10 up and not being able to bring anyone down, I have to watch how many kids I put on my varsity roster because I don't want to have one kid getting one shift every game because he's a fourth line forward. Just something to think about as you guys discuss that.
I agree. It's a difficult balance. It was one of the reasons that we floated the concept of getting rid of the JV state tournament for just those kind of reasons. And maybe someday that will be the norm. As I pointed out at the time, we are not only, we are the only sport in the state of Illinois that has a JV high school tournament.
Right.
We are one of only 3 states in the United States that has a JV state tournament, and the other 2 states are trying to get rid of theirs. In an effort to try and simplify the system, we're trying to go to this new, as I say, more NCAA type of, and it's nice where your league play for the entire year counts to get you in. It means something. I understand your dilemma. And I mean, part of that may be that kid starts on JV and you let him play up enough games that he will, be on your varsity when it comes state tournament. In our consideration, what we're talking about is that in terms of games played and percentages to qualify for state, if you take what we're talking about right now, if a JV player moves up, all of his games that he has played, both JV and varsity, will count in terms of his eligibility. So that even if you move a kid up at the end, he still gets credit for all of those JV games he played before he moved up. So that's another way to try, if he's a bubble player, say, hey, you can work your way up to varsity.
Right.
So that's another concept. We had a couple questions from downstate. No, at this point, there's no plan to do JV state tournament in Central Illinois. And if Mike Mullally has the intestinal fortitude to travel like he seems to like to travel, then we're hoping to do the downstate varsity state tournament again. I think it was a wonderful venture. It is the brainchild of Mike Mullally, and I give him full credit for putting it together and getting it done. It was an amazing undertaking, and hopefully that'll be something that will be solidified going forward. For answer to that question.
Good. Jack, I know you and I talked a little bit yesterday about the playing on dual rostering,
Yes.
and maybe you want to touch on that a little bit
Well,
and kind of the lack of
right
knowledge
now-
we have right now.
Right now, we're kind of in the throes of the state defining what a team is, and right now they're trying to look at containing the spread of COVID-19 by not having changing team groups. So things like up and down or dual rostering, being on two teams is a huge question. And we're going to need a lot more clarification from the state before we get there. We don't know, and that one is entirely out of our hands. We're hoping to be able to do things as we have in the past, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah. I think the genesis of that question for the folks on the line is that the Restore Illinois, the guidelines coming down are that you keep your kids in a pod, right? Before it was pods of 10, now it's pods of no more than 50, but two groups of 25. And if you are a dual rostered player, say high school and a 18U team with a club, well, in essence, you're right there. You're moving from one pod of kids to another pod of kids as you go to those two different sessions or practices or drills and skills or whatever you're doing in this particular moment. So it applies to youth and girls as well. We have girls that double roster with youth. So just be cognizant of those guidelines, and the parents need to be they need to understand the situation they're putting their kids in as well. But the recommendations are that once you're with a group, that you stay with that group and you don't switch groups. And so as we move through phase 4 to phase 5, things could change, and obviously state guidelines can change as we move forward. You just need to follow the guidelines, as was said yesterday morning, as best you can with your facility, your club, your state, local guidelines as well. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we look at dual rostering.
Anyway, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank all of you guys and gals, put in a whole lot of work. I'm hoping that high school hockey will exist this year. I don't know what to expect from the outside world, but we can only control what we control. So let's put together our programs, make sure everybody gets registered. Let's make sure we use our resources like IHOA to come talk to our teams and our coaches. If you need any additional help, the high school committee is a strong group of participants. It's a very strong group of participants, and it's really a team project at high school. We get together, we talk, we work things out, we do the best we can to try and improve it for the kids. Jim, I think we had a request of
Yep, Donnie Allard's contact.
Donnie Allard's contacts, and
Don, you still there?
is it, if it isn't, is it don.allard at AHI2 or?
Yes.
I'm still here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, my email is on the USA Hockey website. If somebody wants to write it down. It's USAHRMCentral1@gmail.com. And I'll put it in the notes here so everybody has it.
Great. Thank you, Don. Anybody else have any questions that I can actually answer? I appreciate it. Jim, thanks for a great weekend. You did a great job of you and Gretchen and the group of putting this whole thing together. Everybody that was involved, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the folks that joined the high school session and several of the other sessions this weekend. We appreciate it very much. These are all being recorded. They'll be posted as well for review. If you need to look back at them, or if you have others that want to see what they missed, they can pull up those, and that information will be sent out to everybody. It's on the AHI YouTube page, the presentations as well as the videos that have been recorded will be there as well. So I appreciate everyone's time. If I could ask the AHI staff to stay online, everybody else can drop, and I'll take care of ending the recording, and give me a few minutes to do that.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.